It has always been said that one person's trash is another person's treasure. But what happens when you have a pile of items whose value you don't know? Over the past years, I've collected lots of books, whether carrying on existing series or just books I'm excited to read. I love having a TBR of books to choose from, but my pile of unread books is currently sitting at around 300, whereas I would rather it be a much less overwhelming 50 or so. Whilst I love having options to pick from, too many options inevitably just give me decision paralysis. So, over the course of this video series, I'm going to look at reducing my physical TBR down through a series of games, prompts, and good old-fashioned randomised picks. Thankfully, I'm not much of a mood reader, and challenges are actually a way I have found which really gets me excited to read and keep reading. I hope to discover how many of these unread books become treasures I can add to my collection, or ones I will trash, by which I mean I'll be donating or passing those on to other people who will hopefully find in them a new treasure now it's free from my hoard. Hi, I'm Kyla and welcome back to the Infinite Library. Today we're starting a new video series. As you saw in my intro, this is the very first episode of my new series, Treasure or Trash. Editing Kyla, just popping in here because I realised I completely forgot to mention that of course this video series, like all the other ones that are currently out there, is really inspired by some certain booktubers that kind of started this trend off around last year. So obviously Becca and the Books, Shelve It or Scrap It series is a big influence in me doing this. Everyone reads it all in Boss or Toss. Riley Marie has also done like a clearing TBR kind of series. There's plenty of other videos out there, but those are the ones I really enjoy watching that kind of inspire me to want to do my own version of it as well. So that was just me coming in quickly to mention that because they do deserve the mention because they're all very entertaining series, which, you know, if you haven't already watched it, go watch it. So here are some little quick videos I've taken of what we're working with. We have this whole bookcase, and then we also have this four stacks, should I say, of books that are currently unread, a bunch of physical books in my library. For this first episode, I'm not going to do anything complicated for this. I'm just going to go with a very simple randomizer. I have lots of other ideas and lots of fun little games that I can do as I'm going through this series. My aim is to be doing around a video a month, maybe reading about 5 or so books in each video, depending on how things go in terms of like DNFing, in terms of length, in terms of how busy my life is. I'm not really thinking of an end date for this series. It's just something I'm doing for fun, really. So it's not like my whole TBR for the month, but I'm just going to be picking out a bunch of books every month from these physical selection I have and slowly go making my way through them. The piles, the numbers may change because I buy books every so often. I'm not planning to buy lots of books at the moment, but the number will fluctuate up and down as we go. But we are starting with this number of books. Not quite 300, but it's still a pretty high number. As I said, I'm going to be doing various different games and stuff in other months, whether they'll be readathons, whether they'll be board games, whether they are prompts that I'm drawing randomly to pick what I'm going to be reading. But we're going to start very simply from this video with just a good old-fashioned number randomizer. I'm going to put the entire number of books I have into a randomizer, press that button, and I'm just going to read whatever is brought back for me. So, without further ado, let's find out what I'm going to be reading first. Okay, I wasn't expecting it to pick such a high number. Number 264 of 269. So it's not going to be anything from these bookshelves here. It's either going to be something that is in the piles down here, which I will take you down and we'll count them. Or it's going to be something that's still kind of sat on my TBR cart because there are books on there that aren't necessarily for my TBR for this month that are just kind of sat there. So it could even be one of those, which is quite hilarious. So I'm gonna get counting. So 200 is right here, Red Rising. So we're at 200. It's gonna be somewhere in this stack here. 257 is right down at the bottom, so we are going to the TBR cart. Let me bring it over. Okay, we're on 257. Here is the TBR card. It is, as you can see, got some books on it. Not too many, but it's got some books on it. So we're going to start at the top because these are the ones that I'm actually reading this month. So I don't ideally want to be picking one of those, to be honest, because especially because some of these other projects. So 257, 258, 259, 260, 261, 262, 263, 264. Oh no. So this one's quite funny. I actually pulled this out of my TBR jar at the end of the year last year and I didn't get to it. So I had every intention of getting to this soon. This is also a potential DNF for me. Sorry, the lighting here is really bad. So this could be very interesting. We might be starting this video off with a DNF. The Shadow's Edge by Brent Weeks. I have actually read this book before, but I have book one and... Wait, no, this is book two. I just realised. Book one is over here. We're going to be reading book one though. Put book two here in its place where it should have been. This is book one, sorry, of a series by Brent Weeks. It is a kind of medieval fantasy sort of series called The Way of Shadows. Is it called like the Night Prince trilogy or something? I don't really remember. But this is an old, yeah, the Night Angel trilogy. It originally came out in 2008, so this is quite an old one. And this is a book I've had for a while. I have actually read it before, but the reason why it's on my physical TBR is that I feel like I didn't love it. And I read it like so long ago that I just have no idea what I think about this series. And if it's a series I want to continue, particularly because this is the kind of fantasy that I'm maybe not crazy on right now. So this is going to be an interesting one. It's also massive. So we're starting this one off with a chunky book. This is like 650 pages long. I will tell you what about. So it is about a young boy called Azoth, who is a guild rat. He's grown up in the slums, learned the hard way to judge people quickly and to take risks. He becomes an apprentice to a famous assassin called Durzo Blint, the city's most accomplished artist. His talents acquired from alleyway to courtly boudoir. So he basically is trained to become an assassin. That's what the book is about. That's it. That doesn't really tell you much else about it, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about this one. It's definitely a book I wanted to get to soon. So that's something that is good. But this might be a DNF, and if so, then I will also be getting rid of the second book in the series too. This could be a very positive start to the episode. We'll see. Either I will love this and I will be giving this series another shot in that case, or it's going to be denoted. We'll find out, I suppose. Okay, so my bad. I realised if I'd counted correctly, I Am Widow should not have been in that number because it's actually a reread that I'm doing prior to me reading Heavenly Tyrant. And technically, the book I should be reading is actually a proof of Girls of Dark Divine, which I am actually very excited to read. It's like this gothic fantasy with ballerinas. Sounds very exciting. Doesn't come out until August though. But I'm gonna stick with what I originally picked because it felt like the universe was trying to tell me I had to read that book because I didn't get to it last year when I pulled it out the jar. So I am not going to be reading this, but hopefully it will come up later on in this challenge because I do want to read this. Hello, so the first update here, I actually just read the first chapter of The Way of Shadows last night after I finished my previous book. Now, not gonna lie, I've had this sat on my shelf for a couple of days now and I have just not been drawn to picking this up whatsoever. It's just really not calling to me, and I think that's also why I've had it sat in my shelves for so long, even though it's been one that I've wanted to retry to see if I like it more. And I went and had a look at my Goodreads. I gave it a 3-star, which tells me nothing, and there is no review. But I read the first chapter last night, and I don't know if it's because I just finished this book, which is a proof of I Am Not Jessica Chen, which is like a YA mystery thriller with like a slight supernatural twist to it. And for me, thrillers are kind of palate cleansers before books, and I know that this is more of like an epic fantasy kind of thing. Not necessarily epic, more of a grimdark fantasy, I think, but like that kind of more old-fashioned, medievally kind of set sort of fantasy. And I read the first chapter of this and I actually quite liked it. The writing is fine. I found it very easy to read. It wasn't like, despite the length, it wasn't like super dense or anything. And I just started the second chapter and I'm beginning to remember little bits from when I first read it previously. And I'm wondering if one of the main issues is that I didn't really like any of the characters, because I am like a little bit in. Some characters are starting to come back to me now that we have our main character who is Azoth, who is kind of like street rat essentially, like just struggling to get by. And then there's these other two people that he kind of goes with this boy, and then there's a girl called Dollface who they kind of look after, and then there's the actual assassin who takes him under his wing called Durzo. And so far I'm not really getting much of an impression of either of them. So I am going to carry on reading this. I'm going to give it at least maybe about 50 to 100 pages, I think, given how long it is. And I'm just going to see if things come back to me and if I start to actually be like interested and invested on where the story is going. Because if I'm being honest, the premise has not interested me. And I don't know if it's because I know it was a 3-star previously that it's colouring my judgment. Like, I don't just want a DNF because I'm a bit like not really bothered about the premise. I want to give it a solid chance. But I am liking the writing so far, so that is a nice surprise that I'm not automatically wanting to put this back down again. So yeah, I'm going to give it a little bit longer and I'm going to check in and we'll find out if it's a book I'm actually going to carry on reading to its entirety, or whether I do just kind of lose interest with the story and the characters in this one. Hello, it is very cold, so I'm all oodied up. Yeah, I DNF'd The Way of Shadows last night. I got 50 pages in and I was liking the writing. I wasn't necessarily invested in the characters, but I was like enjoying the story and stuff. And then it hit a trigger and it left a really bad taste in my mouth, and I just don't want to carry it on now because of that. Essentially, there is a whole subplot with this guy who's like not running the Thieves Guild, but he's trying to run the Thieves Guild that Azoth is in, and part of the way that he keeps the kids in line is that he SAs them. And I just no, that was just like a hard line for me. I just kind of felt like the author was doing it just to make the guy seem even more reprehensible than he already was. And I'm like, we know he's evil, we know he's awful because he's, you know, hitting them and beating them up. There didn't need to be this threat of SA over the main character and have to see it happen to his friends and the people around him. And it really put me off. And yeah, as I say, it just left a really bad taste in my mouth, and I don't like enough of what I've read of the book enough to want to carry it on past that point, given that it's a theme that maybe might not come up again, but is definitely in it. So yeah, unfortunately for me, this does mean that this first book is going to be a DNF. So I'm going to be trashing this one, and I've also grabbed the second book that I have, and I will also be getting rid of this one. This is just not going to be a series for me, unfortunately. Like, I wasn't super invested anyway, as you all know. Like, I know I originally gave it a 3-star. Nothing about it was really like massively appealing to me, but I didn't mind the writing style. But I think for me, that is just something that is really kind of a line for me in certain books, and it's a line I just didn't want to push myself with on this book given how long it is as well. So yeah, unfortunately it is a DNF for this series. So that does mean, however, that I can roll for the next book, and hopefully it'll be a book that I'm actually able to finish. Okay, so we are going to pick book number 2. Let's see what we get. Okay, so like, what is going on with this random number generator? It literally gave me the number before the very last book that I have. I mean, this isn't going to be easy for me to get, at least, because it's once again on the TBR cart. Yeah, it really wants me to read from the TBR cart, apparently, which, to be fair, are books I'm supposed to be prioritising. So yeah, I guess let's find out what it is. So it's not It, which is the very last book I have here. So here is, oh, it's actually a book I'm already halfway through. I'm already like this far through. It's Welcome to Dolly Hall by Alison Greed. I actually read this for Yelp. Well, I started to read it for Yelp. This is basically all I read on the coach going down, and then a little bit whilst I was there. And then I have just been so busy, I've not had time to pick this up again. I really was enjoying it. It's kind of a dark read. It's a lot to do with forced feminization, and it is a trans book as well. It's really interesting, and I met the author, so she did like sign it for me, and yeah, I was having a really good time with it. But not only was it a little bit heavy, and I was just so busy with trying to read stuff for other projects that I just hadn't got around to finishing it. So once again, the random generator has basically decided I need to read something that I have been putting off getting to. I'm not mad about this, I've got to say. I'm already halfway through it, as I said. I am like 200 pages in, and this is just under 400 pages. So yeah, I'm just over the halfway point. I've not picked this up in like a month and a half though, so I think I'm gonna have to refresh my memory about it. But essentially we're following these two main characters, Stefan, and we're following a woman who has already kind of gone through the forced feminization. It is forced feminization, by the way. This is why it's a triggery sort of book. And basically our main character Stefan is trans but is not out. And he's like really good friends with this guy called Mark, who disappears one day. And after going to this school and going specifically to this place called Dolly Hall at the school, which is like a house on the edge of campus, and he knows that something has happened to Mark, and he actually sees Mark again. And it turns out that Mark is now a woman, and he basically figures out that they're kind of like forced transitioning people over at that, but it's actually done as almost a form of punishment of sorts. The women at Dolly Hall, they kidnap men who are seen as like dangerous and problems to society, and then they re-educate them and force a gender change on them, essentially. So all the women that we see used to be men, and how they have dealt with that, and how they have actually dealt with the transition and now accept being women. But Stefan is actually wanting the procedure because he can't afford to do the surgery. So he's like, for me, this is like the best option. So he's kind of working with one of the girls at Dolly Hall to kind of be incognito and go through the process, but it's a really like dehumanizing process. Like, it's a very tough read, and the author was talking about it and how back when she was kind of transitioning, there really wasn't very much like romantic trans literature. The only thing there was really was fetish books that were this kind of thing that was kind of like forced feminization on men. And she wanted to kind of basically take that kind of like that idea of it being like a fetish book that used to be the only kind of trans literature she could get hold of and turn it on its head. So yeah, it's really interesting. Definitely not a book for everyone, I would say, but I am actually quite enjoying it. It's got a lot of things to say, and I am interested in how they're dealing with the psychology of what's happening in the book. So yeah, I guess I'm finally finishing it, and I'm really not mad about it. Okay, so I finished Welcome to Dawley Hall actually a couple of days ago now, and I've had to sit with it for a bit because this is a really hard one to talk about, I think. I feel like the break I had has either hindered my enjoyment or it's actually made me think more about it, possibly in a good way. So I got through half of this book in November originally. I really enjoyed it. I was eating it up, and then because I had something else to read, I put it down and I just never got around to picking it back up, just because I had no time, not because I didn't want to. And picking it back up again was interesting, and I think I was actually a lot more analytical and critiquey of it when I picked it back up again. The plot had kind of slowed down a little bit at the point I was at, and not really a lot extra happens, to be honest, in the last 150 pages that I had to read. The plot does actually move forward and we reach an end point of sorts, which I was happy about. I was worried it was going to basically just cut off, and I understand because of the series not everything was going to be resolved, but I was hoping we got to a point where at least one or two of the main storylines we've had going on was resolved, and that was the case, thankfully, in terms of what was happening with one of our main characters, Stefan, but not so much of other things. But the thing is with this book is that I feel like it's a book that I could never recommend to anybody, because you have to get past the really sensitive topic that this book deals with, which is forced feminization. And yes, it does discuss this. I agree. I'm glad that at least Stefan is never really on board with what they're doing and is trying to argue about why this is not the best thing to do for obvious reasons. They are literally kidnapping men and forcing a new gender onto them, they're castrating them, all that kind of thing, and then if they don't make it through, they disappear. And I was never on board with that. It just is a really uncomfortable topic for me. And even though they were oh, well, we're only picking specific men and we vet them fully, and they're men who are just going to hurt people in the future, I feel like it's such a drastic measure. And obviously there is no consent included in this. It just happens, and then they essentially brainwash them into thinking and acting like women afterwards. So it's a really uncomfortable thing. This is a trans author that wrote this, and I understand that in the acknowledgement she wrote about how part of this was because she was critiquing the NHS, about how for example Stefan is forced to turn to Dawley Hall and this really harsh program because there is no other way that they could get transitional surgery, and that's really sad. But it's just such a violent method, and it's reverse conversion therapy, almost, is how it feels like. And it just makes me really uncomfortable. So this is a book that I don't think I could ever recommend to anyone. And I liked it, but also it was very uncomfortable to read, and I almost don't know how I feel about it at the end. I think I am keeping this. I think this is going to go in the treasure, and I would check out the next book. But I would be very hesitant about where it's going, because I just don't know where the author's plan is with the storyline and how they are really justifying what is happening to the people in this book. So yeah, it's a really tricky one, and I found it hard to put words together to explain how I feel about this, to be honest. I think the characters are good. I think it's well written. It definitely hooks you, but the core concept is such a dark one, and yeah, it definitely was not resonating with me the further on into the book I got, unfortunately. I don't know if there's going to be some sort of overthrowal of what they're doing later on in the series, and that maybe the place could be used just for people to transition, like Stefan has mentioned that. But it seems like at the moment, with the current people that are running the place, everyone is just indoctrinated into this is the right thing to do, even though a lot of the people themselves feel uncomfortable doing what they're doing and are unhappy about it. So yeah, it's a really tricky one. I just came out of this really not sure how I feel about it, but I am going to keep it. I am going to carry this on, but hesitantly. And I think if it doesn't look like it's changing in a more positive direction in terms of what they are doing to the people in the book, then I don't think it's a series I can really condone or keep reading, which is a shame because I want to support trans authors. And I do think this is an interesting concept. It's just the level of violence that it makes a whole point about being these people deserve it, but it still rubs me the wrong way, basically. So yeah, that is my thoughts on that. I guess I'm gonna roll for book. God, what book are we on now? 3, I think, and I hope I have a better time with it than this, which just really made me feel a type of way. Okay, so here I am again to roll for book 3. If I get towards the end of like 250, 260 again, I'm outright gonna re-roll because I refuse to have something else from the TBR cart. I want a little bit more variety for this video and to pick something that feels more random. So let's roll the random number generator. I realised last time I actually forgot to put the number down from 269 because I've obviously read 2 books since then. So we're actually going to be doing between 1 and 267. So here we go. Oh, there we go. That is a better number. 168. Let's find out what that is. Okay, so 168, a much more decent number. This could honestly be either on this bookcase here or it could be on these books down here. I'm honestly not sure, so I'm gonna count and we'll find out. Okay, so 160 is Feybound. It's hard to see, sorry, but it is indeed Feybound. So I think we're gonna be in this very bottom stack here. So let's count. 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68. Ooh, it's a sci-fi that I kind of bought on a whim, actually. Let me grab it out. Okay, so this is The Last Gifts of the Universe. This is a cozy sci-fi that honestly, I just saw the cover and I read the premise and I just thought that's for me. It's not even that old. I think I only bought this like a few months ago. I don't remember when it came out, but I think it was fairly soon after it first came out. But this is actually quite a short one. It's a little cozy sci-fi. And I'm really happy about that. I'm really excited to try this out and see if I like it or not, especially because it's a book that I've very recently hauled. And yeah, it has a little cat in an astronaut suit. This is about a dying universe, a search for answers, and adventure at the end of a trillion lifetimes. When the homeworlds finally achieved the technology to venture out into the stars, they found a graveyard of dead civilizations. What befell these worlds is unknown. All they know is that they are the last ones left, and whatever came for the others will one day come for them. Scout is an archivist who scours the dead worlds of the cosmos for their last gifts. Interesting technology, cultural rituals, anything left behind that might be useful to home and their survival. During an excavation on a lifeless planet, Scout unearths something unbelievable. A surviving message from an alien who witnessed the world-ending entity thousands of years ago. Now Scout, their brother, and their sometimes fearless space-faring cat, Pumpkin, must race to save what matters most. I am pretty excited about this. I believe this is a debut novel by Riley August. They might be a non-binary author as well. I can't quite tell from this, but it's giving like they, them kind of pronouns. So I'm assuming they're a non-binary author. And yeah, really just excited to read this. It sounds super cozy, super what I'm in the mood for at the moment, actually. Okay, so actually looking at the Goodreads, this book was previously released in like 2022 or something. So it is a 2024 release, but I think it must have had like an indie publication. Also, the author's name is different, and I believe they've changed their name, so I do think this is a non-binary or trans author. But yes, it originally came out 2022. I suspect self-published. I'm trying to find out now. Yeah, self-published, and then it's had a official release by Penguin and Hanover Square Press. And it's their only book, so yeah, interesting. Hello, so I finished this morning The Last Gifts of the Universe, and overall This was just fine. I liked it. I enjoyed the characters. The story itself didn't really grip me, unfortunately, and it started to get a little bit repetitive the more it went on. And this definitely does fall into the genre of cozy sci-fi. There are some like life or death moments, definitely. But the general message and themes of the story is a lot more about like simpler, I suppose. Like, this isn't trying to do anything big and exciting. This is a very soft story that's about communication and about love and about what people leave behind once they die, which is the last gifts of the universe, essentially. So we're following Scout, who is, I kind of want to say they're non-binary or trans. We never really get a definition one way or another, but they're always kind of called they. Their name has changed. They get dead named later on in the book, so we know they've changed their name, and they wear a binder. So I'm just going to kind of assume that Scout is either trans or non-binary for this, but that isn't really a part of the story, to be honest. And traveling with their brother and their pet cat Pumpkin. Pumpkin was definitely some of the best bits in the book, for sure. I really enjoyed that, even if I do kind of agree with how some of the other characters are a bit like, you really shouldn't have a cat out in space with you when it's kind of dangerous, but also Pumpkin seems to be having a grand time. I enjoyed all the relationship dynamics between Scout and their brother. I sort of enjoyed the run-ins they kept going into with like this rival organization. They're basically trying to get hold of these information caches which could reveal details about why these horrible creatures came and destroyed so many planets in the universe, and they're kind of racing against one another to get hold of the information. But it felt very repetitive in terms of that towards it, so the plot kind of lost me, unfortunately. But I did like this overall. It was a nice little quick read. Honestly, the kind of perfect read for me right now, because I'm not feeling 100%, and this was just very easy to read. And I do like the writing style. I would probably read more from Riley August, I think, in the future. But I think for me, this is gonna be, it sounds bad saying it because I did like it, but it's gonna be a trash. This is a 3-star book for me, and I just don't see myself reading this again. Like, I even was starting to find myself a little bit bored as it was going on, and it's only because I was already so far through and it's this short that I kind of kept going. I lost investment basically as the story went on, unfortunately, so I just don't think it's going to be one I'm ever going to want to go back to. So I would rather pass this on to someone else who I think it could possibly be a new favourite of theirs. Definitely not a bad big book by any means. Definitely am realising that some cozy sci-fi works for me, and I think if this had had a better plot and had been less repetitive, it probably would have really worked for me, but it just never quite went far enough in what it was trying to do, I felt like. Unfortunately, another trash for this episode, but by no means a good book. So now we are done with this one. Let us roll for book 4, which might be the last one of this video, to be honest. I was aiming for 5, but it's been a really busy month and I kind of wanted to wrap this up in January. This might be the last book of the vlog, unless it's one that I either finish really quickly or I DNF it, in which case I will indeed roll for a 5th book. So without further ado, let's roll and see what we get. So after that book, we are down to 264 in the shelves. So let's see what we get. Again, hoping not for a latter one. Oh, okay, 105. This means it's actually going to be on the bookshelves. 100. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, okay. Not a book I was expecting to get to soon. This is Song of the Huntress by Lucy Holland, author of Sister Song. I have already read Sister Song. It was a Viking historical fantasy, which I quite like. I believe this is also Viking times. This might be based around Boudicca. I cannot quite remember. But yeah, it is a sapphic historical fantasy set in 60 AD Britain. A warrior queen, a damned immortal, and a curse that must be broken. Hoping to save her lover and her land from the Romans, Hela makes a desperate pact with the Otherworld king. She becomes Lord of the Hunt, and for centuries she rides, reaping wanderers' souls, until the night she meets a woman on a bloody battlefield, a Saxon queen with icy blue eyes. Queen Aethelberg of Wessex is a proven fighter, but after a battlefield defeat, she finds her husband's court turning against her. Yet King Ine needs Ethel more than ever, The dread kings of Wessex are waking, and they must master his bloodline's ancient magic if they are to survive. Something dark and dangerous is at work in the Wessex court. As she and Ethel grow closer, Hela must find her humanity and a way to break the curse before it's too late. I actually have a signed copy because I met the author at Chimera, which was Sister Song was actually one of our book club books, but I was also reading it for Chimera, and this was her new book. And I really quite liked Sister Song. I went in with fairly low expectations just because I'm not particularly interested in that era of history, but I actually really liked it. It was kind of a rendition of an old like folk legend, folk song. I'm happy about this. It's a bit thicker than I wanted it to be honest. It wasn't one that I necessarily felt I was in the mood for right now, but I think I felt the same about Sister Song. So yeah, I'll start it and I guess I'll let you know how I'm feeling with it. I can't believe I almost missed out on Iron Flame though. This vlog almost finally made me read Iron Flame. Hello, quick update. I have actually started Song of the Huntress. I'm quite liking it so far, and now I'm a little bit into it. I can actually tell you a little bit more about what this is about because I was entirely wrong. Well, not entirely wrong. This does have links to Boudicca, but actually this character here, Hela, I want to say her name is. Let me check. Hela. So this character here, the Horns, Hela, she was a former partner and part of a band of warriors that was with Boudicca, and then she basically made a deal with, I believe like it was some kind of king, I want to say he's Fae or something, and she made a deal with him to basically stay with him for 3 days and he would give her the power to like help defeat their enemies. Turns out he did not entirely keep that promise. How very Fae of him and Trixie. The 3 days equated to a century each day. So she comes out and it turns out that it's been 300 years. Boudicca is long dead. The Saxons and the Britons are now around Earth, and she ends up basically becoming her and the other warriors that were with her during this time become the Wild Hunt, which are basically let loose every so often to wreak havoc, and then she's forced to go into a slumber again. And it is on one of these occasions that she goes out and she happens to see our girl here, Athelberg, or Ethel. I am pronouncing that right. There's like a weird pronunciation with this, but it does say how to pronounce it at the front. And she is a queen who has basically is trying to defend their country against the Dumnonians. Probably also mispronouncing that, which are the characters in the first book, I believe. Not those specific characters, but that kingdom was featured in the first book of Sister Song. So people are kind of turning against the queen because she's going out and trying to defend the kingdom, and people are like, that's not what a woman should do. And she's doing stuff that's kind of risky and stuff, and her king isn't. So at the moment, we're going to be going between three different perspectives, between Hela in the Wild Hunt, and these two just saw each other across the battlefield, basically. At the moment, and it brought back some of her memories of Boudicca. Athelberg is currently didn't do too well in her battle, and I believe is now caught, and her husband is trying to work out what to do. So we're seeing all three perspectives, and I am enjoying it. I have to say, so far I'm really not that far in, as you can see, only about 3 or 4 chapters, but I'm having a good time with it, and I am definitely intrigued to see where this is going. Sorry for the bad lighting, but I'm a little bit further into Song of the Huntress, and this is now officially confirmed as being a sequel to Sister Song, because we've got a character who's shown up who was actually a character in Sister Song. They were like this non-binary shaman who helped out one of the 3 siblings, and they've just shown up in this. Obviously this is set quite a way after Sister Song, I want to say, although maybe not, because there's a lot of things at the time of Christianity is starting to take over the old religion, and these are the people that are supposed to do the new religion. But basically in this, the king has started to have some of that old magic, and that's kind of obviously not going great with the whole he's supposed to be a Christian. But yeah, I am further in this now. I'm almost at the halfway point. I'm really enjoying all the character interactions, particularly between these two. I really think, from what I have seen so far, that the king might be Ace, because he's talking about how he loves his wife, but he isn't able to be intimate, and he isn't interested. And I really think it's because he's asexual, and he knows this, but he doesn't know how to vocalize it, particularly given the time era. Oh, we'll find out, I suppose, as it goes. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's hit a bit of a lull, I would say, in terms of the plot halfway through now, but I'm still having a good time with it, and I'm enjoying reading it, honestly. I'm glad that I finally got, well, not finally, but I only got this last year. And I feel like I probably would have just left it for ages because the premise doesn't necessarily interest me. And that is the thing, unfortunately, with Lucy Holland's books. The premise doesn't sound great, but I actually do really enjoy her writing, and I enjoy Sister Song, and I'm enjoying this about as much. I think it's probably going to be a 4-star at the moment, and likely a keep. Okay, on to the final roll. So let's take this down to 263, and let's see what we get. Oh, 133, that's really not that far off the last one that we had, and should be possibly on the shelves. It might just hit the stacks. Okay, so this is where we took from last time, this little gap right here. So this is now going to be 105 because that is where we got to. So let's carry on from there to get to 133. Ooh. Okay. This is a manga. Okay. This is the first omnibus volume, there we go, it's the right way now, of Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is one of my favourite animes. This is exciting. Oh, it's got some really nice colours as well. It's a very hefty manga. It's an omnibus. This is the manga version of the anime. I believe the anime came first, and this is a sci-fi psychological drama series. Really good, really love it. So yeah, this should be actually quite a quick read, and I'm not mad about this for the last one of the vlog. Funny story, I actually managed to find this in a charity shop for 10p, and these are really quite expensive. Normally they're £16 because they are quite hefty. I'm not mad about that. I'm pretty happy about that for my last book of this video. Hello, so I finished Neon Genesis Evangelion. This is 3 volumes in one, so technically this was 3 books, 3 manga, but this is the omnibus edition, and I quite liked it, I've got to say. I am really familiar with the anime series, I really love it. So it was just kind of telling the story that I already know, but the author does it a little bit differently, that they said in some interviews, where they're basically trying to see it from Shinji, who is the main character's perspective, about what is happening to them during the course of the adventure, rather than it being a little bit more outside of Shinji's head, which it is in the anime series. It's a little bit you're observing and you're not quite sure what's going on with Shinji. So that was interesting to see a little bit more of his emotions and his thoughts and feelings. This is definitely going to be a keep for me. I really enjoyed it, and there was lots of little extras as well that I really liked, not just the colour pictures, but there was an awful lot of interviews that were taken around the time the anime was made. There was talking to the character designers, talking to the director, talking to the voice actors, that kind of thing. And I think that really made this book, rather than just being a straight adaptation, there was all this extra content about how the anime was made, how they chose to do different things. There's a whole thing here with the designers of the monsters. He made a little comic about the angels together, and that was just really cute. So yeah, I did really enjoy this. I will definitely be keeping it. I probably will end up collecting the rest of these omnibus books, to be honest, because I think they're really good. So I will admit, at the time of filming this, I actually read this before I read Song of the Huntress, but I'm actually still halfway through Song of the Huntress at the time of me reading this, because I got to a certain point in and I was like, I think I've got time for another book, but I'm not sure. So I rolled just to see if I could indeed get 5 books into this video, and I rolled this and I was like, well, it's a manga, so I definitely am. And I just ended up reading it really quickly, an hour or 2 essentially in the evening, and then I'm going back to Song of the Huntress now. So I'm not going to actually give you my final thoughts of this video right now, but you will see it in the next clip. Hello, so the final update for this vlog, because I finished the last book that I picked out for myself, which is Song of the Huntress. This did take me a little bit longer, which is why I ended up rolling for the 5th book whilst I was still in the middle of this one, just to see if I could have time for it or not. But I actually ended up finishing this off in like 3 or 4 days or something. Once I got into it, I was really into it. And I honestly had a really good time with this book. I thought, just like in Sister Song, Lucy Holland's writing is so engaging, and I really love her writing style. And I was really interested in the storyline. I think I may have preferred this one over Sister Song because there were certain elements of the storyline and the ending that I wasn't too keen of, but I actually enjoyed all the storyline we had in this. That one we had 3 different perspectives, and I thought I was only going to like 2 of the perspectives. Again, actually I quite enjoyed the 3rd perspective as well, which is with the king. It was a really good book. There were definitely some things that I felt like it took like a long time for the penny to drop, like for example about how the king has certain powers, and why that happened was really interesting and also linked back to Sister Song, which I really liked. Overall, I really liked this. I really believed in the relationships between the characters, and I liked where it went. And even though the ending is definitely like more bittersweet, particularly for one of our characters, it felt like the right ending and kind of in line with how Lucy Holland is rewriting like myths. It kind of fit the mythic ending feeling that you often get in myths. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this. It is definitely going to be a treasure. It's going on my shelves right next to Sister Song. So that is a successful end to the very first episode of Treasure or Trash. Let's get the books themselves to stack them up that we managed to get through. So these are the books that we looked at during this first episode. We've had 5 books, but because of Way of Shadows and we have in the sequel, this is an extra book here. It's ended up being 6 books that we've taken off the physical TBR, which is great. And honestly, a kind of a 50-50 success rate as well with that. So I've got 3 trashes, one of which was not a bad book at all. I did quite like this. I just don't see myself rereading it, so I think I'm going to pass it on to someone who will hopefully get more out of it than I did. And then, yeah, a DNF of a series here with the Night Angel trilogy or series. I don't know if it's a trilogy or not, by Brent Weeks. I'm not sad to be seeing this go, to be honest. I kind of always knew that I had middling expectations of this one, so not sad to be getting this off my shelves, and they're very thick, so that definitely frees up some space. And then we have 3 treasures, and they're all books that it picked wisely for me. We got a fairly newish book that I did need to be pushed to read and pick up, simply because the premise didn't appeal to me, but I actually really enjoyed it. And I'm going to stop judging Lucy Holland's story premises now, just because like Viking and mythic stuff doesn't particularly interest me. Also, as well, I think with this, it's making me think that maybe I'm being able to read epic fantasy again, which is really nice. I was really kind of feeling a bit low about epic fantasy, really just not vibing with it. And this is the first one I've read in quite some time that I've really enjoyed. And maybe it's because it's a standalone and not a whole series, which obviously much epic fantasy is in really long series. It's still quite a chunky book though. But I really gelled with this, and it has made me want to dip back into epic fantasy. Maybe not like as much as I used to, but I'm really happy that I found an epic fantasy that I really liked again. So we had a success with that one. We had a manga success, which I kind of knew was going to be a success, but I'm glad I finally got to this again, because I watched the anime, probably something I would have put off reading, but it was a nice little breather whilst I was reading the epic fantasy. And I finished a book that I meant to finish last year and never quite got around to finishing. And I kind of like that I had the break now, just because it actually made me be more analytical about it on that finish reread. So I do want to carry on this series, but I'm definitely going to be more analytical whilst I'm reading this series, I think, in terms of some of its more complex, controversial issues. Yeah, not bad. 3 that are going to go on my shelves, 3 that are going to be got rid of. And that is the end of the first episode of Treasure or Trash. I hope you enjoyed it. I actually had a really good time doing it, and I can't wait to do this again. It's probably going to be March before I can do this again, just because February is extremely packed because I am reading BookTuber's favourites, and I don't think I'll have time to put extra books on top of that. But I have some exciting ideas what we're going to be doing in March for the second episode. So, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay safe, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!